Hello, we're back on Mapping Faultlines after a 2-week interval, and a lot has happened, especially in West Asia, where on the one hand you have talks between the United States and Iran on the nuclear deal. Does the nuclear deal continue to exist? A lot of talk about war, about the possibility of bombing, very dangerous situation over there. On the other hand, of course, you have Israel's continuous genocidal assault on Gaza. There have been a lot of very brutal incidents which have taken place in the past few weeks. We'll be talking about that as well as the overall situation in the region where the threats because of the United States, because of Israel, have actually increased. We'll be covering all that in this episode. Keep watching. We're joined by Prabir Purkayastha. Prabir, so like I said, West Asia definitely becoming a hotspot at this point of time. We have Iran, of course, where another US military carrier group is actually coming to this area, adding to the one in Yemen. We have daily attacks taking place in Yemen, and of course the genocide in Palestine, Syria, of course, another issue altogether. Could you broadly take us through what is a broad trend of political activity in the region, so to speak?
Well, as you have said, the focus at the moment is really on Iran and, of course, on Gaza. These are the two focal points of the conflict at the moment. But if you look at the larger picture, you already have Syria, which has been devastated. The government has been displaced. A new dispensation has come, and we know massacres are taking place. It's not in control, and Israel is also occupying parts of Syria. Again, something which is still cooking there. It has not really settled down in any sense. Then, as you've already talked about Yemen, the continuous attacks in Yemen from US are taking place, but Yemen has also kept its powder not only dry, but active in some sense, because it still controls the ocean traffic through Red Sea. And if that happens, then the Suez Canal, which is really a key point of connecting the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean, then doesn't work. And of course, a huge detour has to take place around Africa. So all these things are there in the backdrop, as you said. But the focal point at the moment is really Iran, because it is recognized as a power which can stop Israel. And if, therefore, it is allowed to continue, then, of course, Israel does not have a complete sway over the area as it would like to do, because Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Oman, Egypt, they all have, in some sense or the other, aligned with the United States, and they are not a threat to Israel in this region. So Iran looks to be for both the United States and Israel to be the main problem. If they can overcome that, then this whole region they essentially will control. And I think that's the basic background to what we are talking about, which is the nuclear weapons issue, which is now, that's what the talks are all going to be all about. And Israel's proposal, which has been there for quite some time now, that we should strike Iran, take out their capabilities, nuclear possibilities, and also their missile capabilities, essentially convert Iran to another failed state, like Syria has happened. So I think that is the background within which these nuclear talks are taking place.
Right, coming to those talks, Prabir, of course, when Donald Trump took office, there was a lot of confusion as to what would happen. First of all, he went on this maximum pressure campaign, resuming it from his last term, imposing sanctions, not committing at all. But now, over the past couple of weeks, there has been, on the one hand, some positive movement regarding the talks. We see that the second round of talks is scheduled to take place in Rome on Saturday. The first round took place in Oman last week. But on the other hand, we also have extremely threatening statements. We know Netanyahu was did meet Trump very recently. They had definitely discussed Iran as well. And there's generally a sense of not only a threat from the United States, but also increased demands or escalated demands, so to speak. The terms of discussion seem to be also very different right now. So could you take us through what's really as in what is being debated or discussed right now at these talks according to reports?
Well, this is a bit complicated because we have to look at the history of what is being discussed right now. The whole question comes up because there was already an agreement. It's called JCPOA. There were 5+1 countries, as you were saying, in which Iran had agreed that they will allow certain inspections, certain steps to be taken to monitor their nuclear enrichment program, but they had said we are not going to stop it. But we will not enrich beyond X%. I think 20% was the threshold which was there. And that whatever they had enriched, in fact, if I remember correctly, they sent it out to Russia. So effectively, they had agreed that enrichment beyond 20% will not happen, but 20% enrichment is allowed for various purposes, including medical, which you're not going to go into right now. But there is another clause to the JCPOA, because all this was being discussed under JCPOA, that there was a snapback of the sanctions. That if any of the participants in the JCPOA wanted, they could ask for the snapback of the sanctions to take place, and only the United Nations Security Council could stop it. So snapback was automatic unless stopped. So that was the issue, provided any one of the powers there who were party to the agreement wanted the snapback. Because US under Trump walked out of the agreement, it cannot also activate its snapback powers. That I think is going to finish in September. So therefore, if they don't reach an agreement, then there's also the possibility that any one of the countries can ask for a snapback. That is why Iran is willing to negotiate with the US, provided, of course, that they are allowed to continue what they already have. They might give away a part of the enriched uranium or not. That's open to question. But they are not going to give away what the US seems to be asking. That means completely stop enrichment, the right to enrichment up to even 20%. This is what is being asked for publicly. And behind the scenes, what again is in public domain, that Israel has proposed a military strike on Iran, while what is in what we are hearing again as leaks, that is not something which Trump is willing at the moment to go for, because I think it was New York Times who leaked this, that essentially Trump believes that without US participation, Israel doesn't have the capability of doing this, stopping whatever is there, because they need, I think, this huge bunker buster 20,000 pound bombs, which they have, only US has. Without that, it can't happen. But also he believes that Israel does not have the capability of doing it. And he doesn't at this stage want American direct participation into this. If Israel could do it, he could provide the military umbrella so that retaliation would not harm Israel that much. But not participating is still the view that he seems to have, that we will not participate in the attack. We'll protect you from any counterattack. And according to what, again, New York Times reports are, that it seems that Israel does not have the capability by itself of taking out the nuclear processing, whatever fissile material they have produced and so on. So defanging, as it were, the nuclear option that Iran has is not within the military capabilities of Israel. That seems to be the current scenario. And that's why even today the talks are on. Right. That it is not really that it is only Iran which is beseeching for the talks. And the reason why the talks are on, because as every week goes by, Iran's enrichment of nuclear fuels fissile material, if you will, is reaching breakout capabilities. Not only reaching breakout capabilities, are going beyond that.
Right. So, Prabir, in this context, could you maybe take us through what that technical term really means in terms of Iran, of course, has made it a point to clarify that it does not want nuclear weapons. At the same time, it has indicated that it has the ability to develop one. So, how do we actually see where Iran is positioned right now?
Well, Iran is positioned where India was before it did the nuclear bomb, before Pakistan also did the nuclear bomb, the explosions which took place. And both of these were that we'll have enough fissile material which we can use very quickly to assemble a bomb. So that was really the issue. The question is, what is the fissile material that we are talking about? 20% enrichment reaches you to a level where you can use this fuel in various nuclear applications, but not a bomb. If you want to go to 60%, that's highly enriched uranium, then you have to go through a number of cycles in which it is passed repeatedly through either centrifuges or gaseous diffusion, whichever technology you are using. And that means the number of times you have to pass it becomes more and more concentrated, but it requires a large time to concentrate it up to 60%. But from 60% to 90%, which is considered weapons grade, that period is short.
Right.
And that is where Iran, which did not want to do beyond 60%, but when the JCPOA Americans walked out of it and virtually Iran was left in a position where the threat is there, but they don't have any capability and there is no protection of JCPOA as it existed, then they started saying, okay, if we're not going to have the agreement, then we have the right to concentrate uranium. So they have enriched the uranium up to 60% level and they're continuing to build that stockpile of 60%. And then the question is, from 60% to 90%, how much time do they need? So here is the chart. This is by Institute for Science and International Security. So when it says ISIS, we should remember this is an American institute. So they have calculated that 7 days is what they now would need. This was in February.
Right.
To concentrate this for one weapon, and they have given a chart for 8 additional weapons, 1 month, 2 months they would have 12, 3 months they would have 13. Like this, they have got a sequence of how much it can do. And what it comes out is that every month the number of weapons they can add is going to increase. So even after 5 months, there will be only 15. So it's not that there's a huge stockpile of bombs that they would have. But as you know, with nuclear weapons, you have reached a stage that people don't want to dice with this, dice with the future, their future, Iran's future. So therefore, since Israel also has nuclear weapons, Iran has nuclear weapons, or would have nuclear weapons, by now probably has a nuclear weapon. So what we're really talking about is the danger that a nuclear exchange might take place if they do not reach an agreement. And here, essentially, the ball is in the US court, because US can prevent Israel from attacking Iran. Since Israel is not the one who walked out of JCPOA, Iran didn't walk out of JCPOA, US did. So if it comes back, of course, Trump would be questioned, why did you leave it at all? But if he comes back to the agreement, then temporarily this issue would settle down and perhaps some kind of strategic disengagement between Iran and Israel would be possible in the region. Therefore, the chances of peace would look brighter. If it doesn't, we're looking at a scenario where even a nuclear exchange is possible. If not a nuclear bomb, even a dirty bomb would do as much damage as a nuclear bomb would, or equivalent amount of damage. We are in a dangerous period of history in which a nuclear exchange between 2 nuclear powers is possible in West Asia. And I think that is not something even Mr. Trump is looking up to. Whether he will try and take out Iran completely, will he succeed? Will that be his calculation? Or he wants to come back to JCPOA is something that we have to really wait and watch. And as we have discussed earlier, we can predict larger politics. We can't predict individuals. And this has become finally a decision of one person. So that's the problem.
Right. So Prabir, moving on from that very dangerous moment where hopefully tomorrow the talks lead to some breakthrough to what is happening in Palestine right now, in Gaza specifically. Of course, very horrifying visuals from a couple of weeks ago when Palestinian Red Crescent workers were mercilessly shot by Israeli soldiers. Executed. Clearly a war crime. Although Israel, of course, as usual, accepted it in various stages, and the United States, of course, had nothing to say about this. But what we are seeing is a continuation of these kind of war crimes, of genocidal attacks on health workers, for instance, attacks on journalists, attacks on civilians, of course, continuing for many months right now. And this incident, I think, specifically indicating the extent of brutality and very emblematic of what Israel has been doing for all these months.
You know, the earlier attacks have been in hospitals, and the standard argument has been there is a Hamas center over there which is leading the war. So this has been always the excuse with which they have moved. In this case, they thought they had finished the evidence that killed all the medics. Actually, one of the medics who was witness had survived. But they had shot everybody else, and they thought there was no evidence to show that they had committed a war crime, except for the fact there was a mobile phone. One of the executed medical personnel over there, he had it in his pocket, and he had recorded what was happening. And that clearly exposed what Israel's position was, that they said...
Visuals from...
Yes, this is the video, the screen grab from that video. This showed that Israel lied on one simple count. They said these vehicles came there without their lights, no identification that they were medical crew, and therefore we thought they're attacking us, and therefore we shot and killed all of them. Now, here the video shows very clearly the Israeli army was lying. Now, we know that the Israeli army has been doing all this. There's enough evidence otherwise to show it. But this, unfortunately for Israel, showed up because the bodies were dug out. United Nations workers were actually taking an initiative to find, because this was under really United Nations mission. And when they found the bodies, this mobile was discovered in the pocket of one of the people. Now, this has exposed Israel publicly and its military publicly. But the point is, this has been known for a very long time. It's unfortunate that both the United States and the European Union, who are willing to condemn human rights violation with respect to Russia, with respect to China, whether they exist or they don't exist. But when even evidence is presented, which has been presented for the last more than a year, they're still not willing to talk about it. And that has not stopped. And that is I think, the takeaway from this, that we know what is happening, they know what is happening, but why they keep silent? Of course, that also we know. But how long can the West continue with its, shall we say, complete duplicitous behavior with respect to human rights? I think that is the question that this particular video exposes.
Right, Prabir, and of course, going back to the larger plan that Benjamin Netanyahu seems to have, which is, of course, on the one hand, genocide, but also involving clear ethnic cleansing. We see that Israel is in the process of, or actually has completed what is called the Morak corridor over here. And it is looking at dismembering Gaza and throwing out as many of its people as possible. In fact, the city of Rafah is, I believe, isolated at this point. And this actually builds to the large. So it's not just mindless violence. That's, of course, one part of it, but also clearly in the background, a very specific campaign towards achieving its larger goals.
Well, what its larger goals have been spelled out by Mr. Trump himself. Evacuate this, make it into a nice resort for Europeans to come and spend their time, but also, of course, Israelis to come and spend their time seaside. So giving away vital coastal property to the Palestinians is something Mr. Trump thinks is wrong. That should really belong to, quote unquote, us. So that is of course, the larger project, because this is all on the Mediterranean Sea, therefore Mediterranean Ocean. So therefore, in Trump's terms, it is prize property, right, beachfront property. As you have said, this is the corridor. And as you can see, this corridor is, of course, the border with Egypt. So that's also under Israeli control. This corridor means then you have chopped off Rafah. Right. Next, you move their population to other parts of Gaza. And then bit by bit, you can start by, you also have this next corridor, then you do that. From this side, you can try and anyway take out this part of it. So the idea seems to be bit by bit dismantle whatever exists in Gaza and force the people to migrate, evacuate, pressure Israel, Egypt, pressure other countries, Jordan. So this seems to be the attempt. Of course, both Egypt and Jordan have refused because they know their population will not accept it. But the project there doesn't seem to have stopped, and tacit support or active support of United States is behind this project. So it really, at the moment, it's heartrending for us to see all this, to talk about solidarity, but the virtual helplessness that the rest of the world seems to have imposed on itself, that we can talk about genocide. Even European countries have now started talking about it, not India. We say peace, but we really are tacitly, implicitly or otherwise shutting our eyes to the genocide that is happening. But there is no muscle behind the talk of genocide. The European countries who are willing to shout from the rooftops about genocide in Ukraine, they don't seem to have any such feelings or sentiments towards the Palestinians, which is an old argument that ultimately they are settler colonial powers, and therefore native genocide is not something that really bothers them. Otherwise, it's difficult to understand why the conscience of the people in different parts of the world is being roused by what they see. But the government seem to be completely immune to all of this.
Thank you so much, Prabir, for giving us an update on what is happening in West Asia as a whole. We'll be covering this, and maybe we'll come back next week to see what's happening in Iran. Also, Yemen, which is very closely connected to what is happening in Iran as well. We know that one of Trump's demands is that Iran stop supporting Ansar Allah in Yemen, although he makes it sound like they're an Iranian proxy, which is definitely not the case. So we'll be tracking all that. That's all we have in this episode. We'll be back next week with more news from around the world, geopolitical analysis, and give you an exact view on how to see what is happening right now. So keep watching NewsClick.